Hey everyone, I am Cadieux. I'm an animator and illustrator.
And hello, I'm Ira Marcks. I write and I draw comics.
So my background is primarily in journalism, and as an animator in journalism, I have to think a lot about visual storytelling, and specifically the responsibility of the storyteller and how to communicate ideas clearly and fairly.
Yeah, and as a graphic novelist, I'm making stories for young people, and I think a lot about what it means to be quote-unquote kids entertainment and how the feelings we get about this stuff when we're young stick with us through our whole friggin' lives.
Yes, which we have spent a lot of time talking about that exact thing. And after literal years of talking about cartoons and diving super deep into our feelings about them, we spent a lot of time exploring what they mean to us as kids growing up, the formative experiences we have with cartoons, but also how they affect us now as creative professionals, as working adults. So finally, we decided there was no other way forward but for us to get official and make a podcast about it.
The solution to all things. Start a podcast.
Yeah, the final destination.
Yeah, final destination. And to kick things off, we're tackling the universe of Pixar Studios.
Yeah, perhaps you've heard of it.
From its humble beginnings as a Steve Jobs startup with all the resources and money you could possibly want, right on up to its place as top shelf cartoon storytelling. What do we expect from this studio? And is there a certain feeling that Pixar movies give us? And what is their responsibility to us in particular, Caitlin?
Specifically you and I. I look forward to their response.
Yes, we're waiting.
Welcome to Cartoon Feelings.
Can I tell our origin story?
Yes, I actually have no idea what that is to you. So yeah, you totally can do that.
Let's tell the origin story of the podcast.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
because I asked you to do this, just to be clear, right?
Yes.
I just want that on the record.
Yeah. No, what am I supposed to do? Be like, no, I did.
Well, no, I mean, they don't know that. You could lie.
That's true, but then you could just post the receipts. But actually, I have Twitter control, so you can't post it from an official channel.
Yeah, that's true. At the end of the day, you have the full control.
Yeah.
So we're here at the end of 2020, just as a little timestamp. But you and I have not talked in like 10 months. True.
At least, yeah. If not more.
And I, whatever. 2020. That's like a totally normal thing for two friends to just not talk for 10 months, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that weird. Honestly, I don't know how frequently we talked before that. It was fairly regular, but I feel like it was one of those things where it was just like whenever we have time, we would catch up and then we would hang out for like 4 hours and talk about trash and nothing, like cartoons and like movies and whatever the whole time, like all night. And then like again for however long, like not see each other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is like a great friendship to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's working to this day. And the point I was getting at was I remember the end of our last conversation because I felt it was cut off, which is why we are here today to pick up that thread. So you and I went to the last movie theater experience anyone will ever go to because that's over. Officially today, I think movies are just over, right?
Yeah. I did see some chatter on Twitter about how theaters are canceled permanently.
Yeah.
I don't know the details, but it sounds serious.
Yeah. And we're both sad because we both love going to the movies.
It's one of my favorite hobbies. So hopefully that doesn't shake out. I did see a tweet from David Sims of movie podcast fame, actually, just before I jumped on here, that said optimistically that maybe people actually will love movies even more because of the pandemic. I would like to think that he's right. Time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's in his best interest.
That's true.
And ours.
Yeah.
It's just like
we are a biased sort.
Yeah. Most people could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So so we went to see the Pixar movie Onward. And
that is true.
It was fine. It was good. I guess it's a decent last movie. It's a good one to go out on. It was about things we both like.
It was by a studio that we both have a lot of loving feelings for.
Yeah. And on the drive home, we were just recounting the Pixar-ness of things. And I don't remember the exact phrase because, again, this was 10 months ago. So give me a friggin' break here.
And several years as well.
True. Yeah. Tucked in with, a nesting doll of years tucked in the last 10 months. But we were talking about just the Pixar-ness of going to see a Pixar movie. Because when I talk to someone who is just, a casual moviegoer who will see a Pixar movie, knows that is a studio and understands a bit of the brand, they go to the theater expecting to cry, which always kind of bugged me because if I was part of, a creative process like that, I wouldn't want people coming in with a very specific expectation like that. So I just thought that was kind of like, I don't know. I wanted to talk about Pixar as just like a bigger idea. Are you on board with that?
Yes. Actually, I'm like so ready to already respond to the things that you're saying.
Yeah. So the idea here is to, let's start with Pixar as kind of the abstract. And then, we'll do another episode or two or whatever. And then timeline wise, Soul will be out. So maybe we can talk about lead up to like what we expect that movie is going to be or something.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about how we were totally wrong.
That'll be good to talk about, especially because like as of this moment, I don't know that much about Soul. And what I do this generally with movies is that I really tend to just avoid learning a lot. I mean, a lot of people do this. Like I don't go out of my way, but I try not to see trailers. I like just putting a movie on and like seeing where it's going to go. So all I've seen of Soul is like, one or two trailers that have come out and that's it. I really only remember seeing a teaser. I don't know if they've even released anything more, but obviously like not a lot of information in that trailer. So I am excited to kind of see what it's about at all. I've already been aware of like some controversies that people are like, something that maybe we can get into on a different podcast episode at some point is the tendency in animated films with Black characters for them to spend the most of like the majority of the film as not people. So like Princess of the Frog, first Black Disney princess, and then she's a frog for like most of the movie. And it's weird that you'll notice that happens in like all of the movies with like a Black character. So I know that people have seen the trailer for Soul and been like, why is he going to spend most of the movie as like this dead character that is colorless and kind of like iridescent? Anyway, that's a whole thing to unpack.
You're right. And it's like the inevitable hard turn into a very serious issue. And that's something that hopefully we can like get into with some guests down the line because we're just two white people talking about this stuff. Two very white people,
yes.
But we also care because we love these things and we want them to be better and we want them to like represent a bigger picture of our worldview. So when they fail to do that, like it makes sense that people get upset.
Yeah. And
right?
It's going to be interesting to get into all of this, just talking about Pixar in general as a studio, especially because so Toy Story came out in 1995, I think. So I'm like 5 years old, like an actual baby. And everybody grew up with that. Like we all, grew up with Pixar movies. And then as you get older and you kind of realize like all of the sort of trash and like grossness that's associated with the industry. Not even just Pixar, but like going back to like the olden times of ancient Disney and all of this stuff. Like it's very shocking and troubling. And yeah, it's weird. It's like animation is so foundational to me and like something I love the most, but it has so many problems.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully,
because it's an industry at the end of the day, right? It's like a fucking business when you pull back the curtain, which is sad. Well, now we're coming to an inevitable point of conversation where where the audience learns that we are not the same age. How old are you?
I just turned 30.
Okay. So I'm 37, which, no. I'm not 37.
Oh,
I'm 39.
no.
I don't know why I said 37.
You can't cut
That's
that.
so specific. No.
You can't cut that out. That's going in the podcast.
So it doesn't matter, and it does matter, but I'm 39. But if we're going to talk about something specifically, like where we're coming out with Pixar as a studio and like first experiences, I'm just old enough where it kind of does matter, you know, because I was in 95. I was into, you know, Quentin Tarantino and just watching Reservoir Dogs like on loop at that point. So I already had a sense of like what it meant to be a director or for a movie to have, you know, a place in the world of film. But
that's really interesting to me because obviously in the same year I was 5, so not that educated. But when I was born in Oklahoma, but we moved to Turkey for a few years and I was really little. And we moved back, I want to say like the end of 1995. And what I like, so my first like real memories were in Turkey, where mostly I was watching Disney VHS tapes. And so I think that was like my only experience with movies was just like hoovering down Disney, like, and, you know, with nothing else really. And like not absorbing a lot of like American cultures. And like I was like watching American stuff on TV, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I think that probably just explains a lot about my fixation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was doing a similar thing well into, you know, I didn't have a lot of like friends I was hanging out with until I went to college, really, because I lived in a really rural town. So I had a steady diet of like a small collection of VHS tapes because,
Classic.
yeah, this is like up until 1999. So it wasn't like I was just streaming all over the internet. I was just watching the same things over and over again. And most of that, yeah, was Disney. So obviously we're going to have to like get deeply into Disney at some point because we just know more than any human should about that. Can I jump back farther in time to before either of us remember?
Oh, please. Take us away
Okay.
to maybe a safer time.
So, yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
So I've got a quote from the safest man in animation, John Lasseter.
Ooh, you love to see it.
Steve took a chance on us and believed in our crazy dream of making computer animated films. The one thing he always said was to simply make it great. He is why Pixar turned out the way we did. And his strength, integrity, and love of life has made us all better people. He will forever be part of Pixar's DNA. Do you know what Steve I'm talking about?
I am assuming that you're referring to Steve Jobs.
Yeah. So this is something I hadn't really thought about, but as two people who are like in a visual creative medium industry, we know that there are people behind the scenes that make shit happen and make things better or worse. And you often don't hear those people's names. Like Disney, obviously, Walt Disney is a massive impact on the aesthetic of Disney. But I was thinking, I'm like, man, Steve Jobs probably guided a lot of what early Pixar was, because he's a guy who had been working in technology for a long time before. And his whole thing is really about the look and the packaging of something more than like what's behind the scenes. And that's one of those differences that I've noticed when Pixar first like arrived. I remember seeing Toy Story for the first time and being like, wow, this is not Disney, because it's really paying attention to like the rendering and the skeuomorphic.
Yeah.
Okay, so like early Apple, you know, follow me here. Early Apple design is all about like simulating like actual surfaces and objects.
Right.
And there's something going on with Toy Story that really helps you enter into that narrative. And a lot of it is like the texture of the wallpaper, like the patterns they use and the way surfaces feel, you know, now it looks dated, but at the time like felt very real in a way Disney was never aspiring to do, and also really couldn't because the medium of hand-drawn cell art was very different. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Like when I think of Toy Story, I think of wood grain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's of all the like hardwood floors and like the banister and the staircase and stuff like that. Like, yeah, it's very vivid.
Yeah. And probably I'll say this a million times over. I think that's the type of thing that really binds you to a piece of media is like that, those like little visual cues or audio cues, like the sound of Tom Hanks's voice, like all these little things that go beyond just like what the story is. Like you don't love Toy Story because the story is really well told and it's like a great script. You love it because you just can really picture that wood grain, right?
Real wood grain. Can feel it. Smooth lacquer.
Okay, so can I continue with the Steve Jobs thing?
Absolutely.
You thought we were just moving on.
I demand that you do.
Good. Okay, so, you know, I read that quote. That's said a lot later. That's said at Steve Jobs' wake, actually, in 2011.
Oh, wow.
Or sometime around then. So this was like Lasseter reflecting on Steve Jobs and his place in Pixar. So if you backtrack to 85, the story begins with Steve Jobs buying a computer graphics division from George Lucas's production company for like $10 million. So what Steve Jobs gets is like a bunch of technicians mixed with a bunch of artists because they're all coming off like Star Wars stuff, which is just kind of a really magical combination to get what you get from that early Pixar stuff. Like, how do you feel about those early shorts? You watched those recently?
I was like thinking about putting them on today and then I didn't. And so it hasn't been super recent, but I've seen them so many times. Like I had the Blu-ray anthologies of them where you could just like run them on a loop and I would just like have them on during the day.
Just comfort food.
It's so wild too, because like some of them are just outrageously old, you know, and like it's interesting to me because more so even than the movies, you can really see the technological development and advancements in the shorts. Maybe just because they're so bite-sized, so you really can just like mainline them like one after another. But it's so wild. It's like we have a lamp as a character, not just because that's like we can make a cute little mini story out of that, but because like we have the technology to make that fine. And then like the Tin Toy short where it's like, this is the first seed of Toy Story, like very early on. And the baby in it is like truly a thing of horror because they just did not have the technology to make it not look monstrous.
Right.
Which is part of the story too. So I guess it worked out. But like, I mean, it's just not, but they were pushing all the time. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, right. That's what you want. If you're like an artist going to see these things, you want to see them excel at their craft, right? And the shorts was like a great place for that to happen. And it was always like this magical little bit. I don't know. I guess it kind of was a throwback to earlier days of cinema, right? Like when you would have like little news broadcasts or animated shorts in front of a bigger picture because there was nowhere else to put that content. So yeah, it's always so fun to see a short like, stuck in front of a movie.
We're all over the place a little bit. I think that's fine. We're going to work through this. But I want to say I felt weird about when we went to see Onward 1,000 years ago in theaters. The short in front of it was a Simpsons short. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
And I have not really seen a lot of The Simpsons. I've actually seen the most Simpsons in my life during quarantine because it's on Disney Plus, and like we just threw it on one day and I was like, oh yeah, like this show was really funny. We just never watched it growing up. Like I just never saw it. So like I had no frame of reference really for that short, and it felt very strange to me because it felt wrong almost. I was like, I actually don't want this. And I don't really remember if the short, like how I felt about it or if it was good or bad, whatever. And I think probably because I was so distracted because I was like, you know what I really want? Like, give me another like Jerry's Game or whatever, like something weird. And it's interesting because the Pixar movies that I love the most now as an adult, I don't really remember caring that much about in the theaters. Like I remember seeing Monsters, Inc. as a kid and being like, that was fun. And as an adult, I have so much more like love and affection for that movie than I did at the time that I saw it. But I always enjoyed the shorts so much. And I always remembered those. Like I remember those sometimes better watching those in the theater than I do watching the movies in the theater.
Totally. No, that makes sense because they're so specific, right? Like they're not like introducing you to a big world with a wide array of characters and multiple set pieces. It's like, here's a little bird on a part of a beach, and that's it. And it just really plants
like,
itself in your
that's the story.
mind.
And like,
Yeah.
I think Jerry's Game was in front of Bug's Life. I think it
Probably.
was, but one of those, and I'm like, what am I, like 7 or 8 years old? And like, I just thought it was the funniest thing. And like, to this day, it's still funny. That's another thing that's like so magical about it. I'm like, this is hilarious. The people who made this were having a great time. Like, they thought they were so funny, and they were right. It is funny, and it looked amazing at the time. And like, for what it is, it holds up really well. I don't know. It was just like, even at that age, I was like, this is art that you've done.
Yeah,
it was
totally.
better to me than Bug's Life was, which I don't hate Bug's Life. I have a love for all of Pixar movies, but I don't know.
Yeah, the shorts are less sentimental in the way the movies tend to be. Like, getting back to that idea of like, when I see a Pixar movie, I'm supposed to cry. That's what I paid my money for. Whereas the shorts, where they're just really bold, and they often dip into maybe a style of animation or art or storytelling that's not part of the mainstream. So you're like, oh, wow, the guts to do that. And they had the money, and they have the attention of people. So yeah, why not do whatever the hell you want to do?
The dream, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I was bringing up the Steve Jobs thing, because it's the capital. It's like the Steve Jobs confidence and money behind this whole endeavor that I think really lets it spread its wings in those early days, because they come out of the gates strong as hell. Like, there's, a couple little shorts where they're experimenting, but like you're saying, they're hilarious. And then the fucking first movie is iconic Toy Story.
Yeah, just
right?
Unbelievable, like, debut film. I understand that, like, obviously, like, John Lasseter had, like, been at Disney before. It's not like they were, like, complete amateurs entering the cinematic film, like, you know, experience. But, like, that's your first movie? Damn. And they continued to go on making the best stuff for about 1 million years before, I think, the cracks maybe started to show a little bit, or like maybe you started to get into maybe like a downturn for Pixar. I have a lot of feelings about that. I don't really understand how they had such a consistently good output. And then also, as we've kind of talked about, like, being aware of all of the rampant issues that Pixar had as a studio for a lot of people working there. Obviously, John Lasseter's entire situation, which we may or may not want to get into in detail, but, you know, if you don't know, you can look it up.
Well, I mean, you could, if anybody, why don't you, I mean, I don't want to talk about assholes too much, but it is like part of the story. But if you want to do you have like a quick
just basically, I mean, we all know that John Lasseter, as far as I know, like, he moved on to, was it Skydance Studios, I think, hired him. So obviously he was out at Pixar, basically because he was just like sexually assaulting all of the employees and like making all of the women that work at Pixar extremely uncomfortable. Which I am not a huge fan of. And yeah, like, I don't want to dwell on that too much right now, but mainly pointing it out because I genuinely feel like they just were, there's a reason why Pixar really was the, like, everybody wants to work at Pixar. Like, if you want to be an animator or an artist, and like old school Disney was the same way, and like it still is the same way in a lot of ways, but like, I'm a 2D person and I'm more interested in 2D in every way. And I wanted to work at Pixar so badly because I had this fantasy idea of what that would be like. And this is embarrassing, but like sometimes I still have dreams that I've like got an internship there or something like that. And it's always like totally incredible. And then I wake up knowing full well that if that had ever happened, I probably would have had a terrible time. Like, I probably wouldn't have liked it, and that fantasy version doesn't exist. But like, how did they do it? Like, how did they make such great movies? And then like, I look at somebody like John Lasseter, who growing up, I was like, man, he really knows what he's talking about. Like, this dude knows, and he loves this stuff. Like, he's an icon. And then realizing like, I kind of hate what he's about, and then still being like, but how are you like this? And yet you made all of this amazing stuff. Like, I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. Yeah.
It's power, corruption, like all that stuff. It's like being, they had a crazy deal with Disney in those early days, right? That like Steve Jobs walked them through because he had knew how to negotiate all that shit. So, Lasseter in that first team Like they had, what was it, like a 3-movie contract with Disney, like right out of the gates?
Yeah, 3 or 5.
In full creative control.
Yeah.
I think it goes up to 5. I think it begins at 3. And then there's like proof of concept in that Toy Story makes like fucking $38 million or some crazy ass amount. And then Disney's like, okay, well, this is a proven concept. It's like a package studio. So let's like ramp that up.
Yeah.
And then by the time like Michael Eisner comes in like 97, things are already up and running, and it's bigger than Disney animation at that point, because now things have kind of leveled off where everything bleeds together in that same way. Oh, now I guess I'm seeing the Simpsons shorts in front of Disney, and it's Pixar Disney. Like everything's a big fucking muddy pit of Disney Plus now. But at the time, Pixar was the cool shit. It made animation cool again because, I mean, you could be nostalgic about that era of late 90s, early 2000 Disney, like Treasure Planet. And, what else is there?
It was like Brother Bear. Yeah, Atlantis.
Yeah, it's like that leaning into CGI a little too heavy when it's like not really ready for you, or you don't know what to do with it, like Pixar does. So there was definitely a big moment in time where just Disney seemed over, and Pixar was dragging the Disney animation team behind them. Yeah.
Interesting time.
Okay. Not that we have to make lists about everything, but
doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
So I was thinking, there's our sort of like general thoughts on Pixar. Of course, there's like a million more things to say, but so with the new Pixar movie coming out, and it's seeming very much in a type of Pixar movie category that leans into the emotional stakes of just human existence, as opposed to like Cars 3. Even though, sure, you could love Cars 3 for whatever reason, but that's more of a...
if you choose to do so.
There's like the plotty Pixar movies, and then there's like the emotional Pixar movies. I think it's, I feel like there's those two sort of realms. Do you see it that way?
I'm curious to know which ones you would categorize as which, but I do kind of agree with you. I've never thought about it that way, but it makes sense to me.
Okay. So the way I was thinking it, and if we could build like this hypothetical, each put out this like top 5 idea of what it means to be like an important Pixar movie. I don't know. I think
so
that's
ready to do that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I just think that's an interesting take on looking a little beyond. These are my favorites because I saw it when this happened, and I was making out during this one. So now, like, Monsters University. No one ever made out during Monsters University.
How could you? Look at the action unfolding on the screen.
That's true. And just Billy Crystal is he's kind of gross.
A gem. No pun intended. I mean, yeah, but can it be both?
Yeah, he's a gem when you animate him. But
like a gross gem.
Yeah. Anyway, we might cut out the Billy Crystal part.
No offense. He might listen, and then you'll feel like a real asshole.
Yeah. Okay, so when I was making my list, I arrived at the Pete Doctor-ness of it all. Like his direction and his influence is what makes my list. Not to like spoil what my list is, but...
Is it okay if we have the same movies on our list?
No, I think we should just shut down our computers instantly and reboot. No, I think I think it comes down to taste, right? You and I probably just have similar tastes. Or
I think that's true. As soon as you said Pete Doctor, I was like, oh. Like,
yeah.
He doesn't dominate my list, but I do think that, I don't know. Anyway, just get into it.
Well, he dominated my day today because I've been thinking about him nonstop. So, okay, I put my list in chronological order. So it's just sort of a top 5 group, not really a list, because whatever, fucking top 5s, they can change all the time, right? So I'm starting with not Toy Story 1, but for me, Toy Story 2 is peak Toy Story, if we're talking about like that franchise. Yeah. Because you get Jessie, who's maybe the best character in all of fiction, maybe.
Undeniable. She is the best. I can't rank her among all characters ever, but like I fully agree with everything that you've just said so far, like all of it.
I'm very connected to Jessie, and it's like one of those Halloween costumes that if somebody's dressed as Jessie, I'm just gonna talk to them. I just feel really connected. It's happened a few times. But I watched one of the Pixar shorts that exploits her condition of small spaces. And it really bothered me that because I feel like in Toy Story 2, they deal with it so beautifully, where it's like part of her story, but it's not her whole personality. Whereas in one of these shorts, she's like trapped in the trunk, and she just becomes kind of like this plot point of like, we need to make a situation for everybody to get out of. And it's like, fuck this. I can't think of another character before that in animation or like no, I don't know. Let's say specifically animation that has that sort of baggage, you know?
Yeah.
And confidence as well.
That's what I liked her so much. Like, I don't know. You might find this shocking, but as a kid, I never was into like very girly stuff. Not that I would I wouldn't describe Jessie as like being girly per se, but it was always a thing where like I was one of the boy toy. Like I always wanted, I don't know, the Hot Wheels or whatever. Like I didn't really gravitate. Like if I was playing like make-believe games with my sister or whatever, and I was really young, I always wanted to be like the male villain character or something like that. So I don't know. I just didn't identify naturally with like female characters. And I think Jessie might be like one of the first characters I saw where I was like, yeah, no, she's awesome. Like she's like fun in the same way, quote unquote, in the same way as like the boys are, but also like sensitive. I don't know. I mean, obviously, literally, if you like to this day at age 30 watching Toy Story 2, like I'm gonna cry every time at the song. Actually, the iconic Sarah McLachlan, song, like, because it was just so damn good. And you're like, I don't know. So hopefully we'll like kind of loop back to this a few times throughout this, but you're talking about the idea of like people knowing going in, like, oh, I'm going to see a Pixar movie, so like I'm going to cry tonight. And I don't like that same conception. And I think there's a point at which Pixar was like, this is who we are and we're embracing that and we're going to pursue it, where it kind of ruined it. And like in Toy Story 2, obviously they don't have a reputation for that yet per se. And like what was so great about it was like, yeah, it did make you cry. But it was just because it felt like we're just making a movie that has an emotional point in it that is genuinely so arresting and touching that you cry. Not that we're going in there trying to contrive a situation to make you cry. It just felt like actual storytelling that happened to be the pinnacle, and it just like punches you right in the gut every time.
Yeah, they become like a parody of themselves as a studio at some point because they know the expectation, which is just, you know, I guess an inevitable path of having a brand for like a creative endeavor, right? It's like, okay, Pixar means this, and you have to lean into that at some point, I guess. Otherwise, people stopped coming. I don't know.
Yeah,
but they haven't
I guess
stopped
it's like,
coming.
no, and why? I don't know. Yeah, mixed feelings about that. I guess I don't know. I don't know if good storytelling really matters in terms of money making, anyway. But yeah, I do think that is a trap that they've fallen into.
Here's another. So yeah, the perfect montage, the Jessie scene under like the fall tree as she gets like left in the box. But there's the other great montage in Toy Story 2. And this is like the other side of it. So you have the emotional stakes of the characters at that like pretty deep level. So the other perfect montage is the cleaner montage, where you just get this beautiful overview of, again, Pixar showing off the levels of subtlety and how they can create textures. You watch them like with a Q-tip, like wipe away the dust around Woody's eye. This is the last time I'll ever talk about Steve Jobs. But to me, that's a bit of this like need for something to be perfect and that thing to be a collectible object or something you buy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you know what's the best thing in life is to have your toys looking perfect. And that's part of like the downfall. That's like the cautionary tale of the story in a way, right? It's like, well, don't do this. This isn't how you use a toy. But in a way, it's also saying the opposite thing by putting this beautiful scene right in the middle about how to like keep your shit pristine.
Yeah, it was like a TikTok filter or something, but like back in the day of like, look at Woody's like perfect skin. And like we've like painted the blush onto his cheeks again. Like that kind of thing is like seamless. Yeah,
it's beautiful. So to me, those are like, that's why I picked Toy Story 2 above Toy Story 1 or any of the other Toy Stories, because it just hits those two things in these two perfect scenes that you could just pull out of the movie and be like, here's what Pixar is all about. It's about,
it also
this pit of emotion and making something look amazing.
Yeah, like the range of what they're able to do. Because I hadn't thought about this before. We were watching a Coen Brothers movie that I hadn't seen before recently. It was A Serious Man. Not one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies, but it just made me realize, like, you can literally just, the way that they make movies, it can be just literally anything happening. And there's a montage in the movie A Serious Man where it's a dentist talking about, like, it's a rabbi talking about a dentist who is just having teeth problems. I'll just say that because it's not important what it's about, but it's like, and it literally is a Shaggy Dog story that doesn't go anywhere by the time he gets to the end. And it was arresting. And that is the power that the cleaner sequence has in Toy Story 2. It's just like so aesthetically satisfying. And it's like that weirdly satisfying where you're like, man, I like want to do that. Like videos of people power washing stuff and like painting perfect lines or whatever. Like it just scratches some kind of like primal human itch in like such a good filmmaking way. I don't know.
Yeah, like, no, you're right.
Damn, Pixar.
Yeah, just the sense of control, right? It's all about that. It's like, oh, if only the rest of my life was as in control as like the control this cleaner guy has over Woody's face right now.
So true. Highly recommend checking out that sequence if you're feeling out of control here at the end of 2020.
Okay, so my first pick was Toy Story 2. You wanna go?
Well, I didn't actually have mine in order at all, but if I was doing it in chronological order, Toy Story 2 probably would have also been that for kind of the same reasons. It's just like I love both of them so much, but Toy Story 2 really ramped up like the emotional, and maybe it was just because I was also older at the time, so I was able to mentally process that better. I don't really know. Jessie is just more relatable to me, maybe too, than like the problems that they're having. Into like I can't really relate to Woody, but like I relate to like a girl feeling shitty. Like that's something that a lot of women can relate to, I think. So that I don't know. That one for me.
She has, you know what else? The thing that I connected with from her, because she, like I related to her, and it's that she's a little naive, but it's not really a weakness in her. She just doesn't know. You know, yeah. She has lived this life and this is what she knows, and she's willing to expand, but she's also a little afraid. It's like, oh man. Yeah. Whereas like Buzz is so brave and Woody is also so brave. They're both like goofy in their own way, but Jessie is actually like, you know, she seems like, I don't know, what age do you think she is?
That's a great question.
Might be unanswerable, but she feels. I'm gonna
say like mid-20s.
Yeah. I guess toy ages are different than human ages.
Say my age?
Yeah, that's what you want her to be, right? You want her to be your age.
I think that's true, though, and I would have answered that at any time of being alive. Like, she's my age.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way.
She's me. And I will just I'm going to move on to my next one, which is literally right after Toy Story 2. But I will just say I liked about Jessie also that you're totally right. Like, she just literally doesn't know stuff, but that she's always extremely enthusiastic about doing whatever the next thing is. And I like that a lot. Like, that is appealing to me. Whereas, like, maybe Woody and Buzz are, like, a little bit more of idiots sometimes about stuff or more hard-headed. And Jessie, to me, is just, like, very positive and upbeat and not stupid. Like, I don't know. She's perfect.
Yeah,
anyway.
Perfect. Jessie's perfect is the conclusion to that.
Truly an icon. Follow me, Jessie. So there are a couple, I swear to God, I feel like a lot of these are like pretty close to being tied, but the one I wrote down next is Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
But it's weird because I almost feel like I don't have that much to say about it. I will start off by saying, like I said, and this kind of goes for a few Pixar movies actually. This is just the first one that I really remember seeing in the theater and just being like, that was like a fun movie experience. And then like not really thinking anything more of it until years later watching it and being like, wow, this is great. And for those wondering, it's like not because I'm like a parent or anything. Like I never had kids. So it's not like I didn't kind of become more like identifying with the parent-child sort of relationship in that. Maybe I just have a better understanding of that. It's just, I don't know. It was, some of it I think has to ultimately do less with the story and more of like the world building. Like I was so enamored with like the entire idea of, you know, the reasons that like we have monsters in the closet is because it's like an energy thing. I'm just like, how did you come up with this idea And this is kind of that era of Pixar where they had a run of movies like that. Because like Wally is another one I think of that where I'm like, where'd you even come up with this as a film idea? And Wally is another one of my picks too. But it was just so enchanting. And then like visually it was exciting. I was like, you guys are having so much fun designing all the monsters, like designing the aesthetics, figuring out how the door thing works. Like this more so than the Toy Story movies even. It's like, this is like a childhood fantasy where you spend all of your time just like making up a fake world. And then with adult brains and adult talents, actually figuring out what that looks like and how it works. Like everything about it is just so fun. And the story is good.
Yeah, that's mine too, because that's chronologically, that's my next one for sure. And that's also the first Pete Docter directed one.
Yes.
Because then see, that's what that's the pattern I was noticing. And this is really, I mean, Toy Story 2 is emotional and like, yeah, Jesse, obviously perfect. But this is the one I remember being the like, oh, when you watch this movie, you cry because it's just so sweet in that last moment, that like final shot where Sully like opens, it just like opens up this whole well of emotion of seeing somebody, thinking about somebody growing up. It's just one of those passage of time things that when it happens in a movie, I just spill out onto the floor. It happened in Endgame when Ant-Man, Paul Rudd, goes back to his house and he sees his daughter and she's older and he's like, you're big. And it's fucking cheesy as hell. But it's just like, time. You can't stop it.
Some bitch. Ain't that the truth?
All you said on Monsters, Inc., I'm on board with all that. You didn't mention the awesome intro, though. That's very like
the
Mary Blair.
With all the, God, it's so good. I get that song stuck in my head a lot. I don't know why. It's just so mellow, but like upbeat and like, with the like kind of tube sea monster thing, like going through all the doors and that too, I guess. I don't think any of the other movies up to that point had an intro like that at all. No. I think they all had like pretty standard, like we're opening a movie and like the credits are on the screen, like type of a deal. And to have that, and honestly, kind of arbitrarily and just like, somebody just put a bunch of doors in After Effects or whatever and is just like going crazy with them. It's like, God, that's really fun.
Yeah, it really, it's a use of it which happens a million times more. Like Disney has started doing it. Like in Moana, they give the lore of the island through the tapestries of the people. And like Coco kind of does it with the paper flags. Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sure there's a name for it, but yeah, you're right in that like Monsters Inc. It's just for fun, right? It's not about the era of the story, even though it's a very specific art era. It's just kind of like a cool intro.
Yeah, there's no VO, but it also introduces you to the general concept, which I like. And I don't know,
it's world building.
Yeah, and it sets a design tone for sure. I mean, the style is obviously totally different, but the colors are kind of the same as what you end up seeing in the actual movie.
Yeah, this sort of weird fake mid-century stuff that I always think of Brad Bird being like obsessed with that in the way like Spielberg is like obsessed with certain like eras. Like that kind of mid-century look is just like starting to emerge in Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, I wonder if he was involved at all or like kind of how...
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe so, but I mean, God only knows.
He's probably in there somewhere, I assume. No, because at this point, Brad Bird did Iron Giant in like 99, right? So maybe he's not...
it would have been just before. So yeah, he might not have been around at that point. What else can we say about Monsters, Inc.?
Well, hair. This is like the movie where it's like, watch this.
That's so true. The fur.
Yeah. It's very clever to not jump to people, right? Like they're like, okay, we can do toys, we can do bugs, shiny, flat things, but we can't do people yet. Like what's in that middle ground?
I do wonder if like they use, because the hair is an obvious case study, but I do wonder if they used like the wild anatomies on the monsters as like trying to figure out the best way to make human bodies work. Cause then they got like a million arms and like all of this stuff. And I feel like if you look at the original Toy Story, you can see there's not as much curve in the animation. Like sometimes an arm just moves in a straight line. And it's like a little unnatural, but obviously, you know, they're new to this. And then as it goes on, even like by Toy Story 2, it already looks like really, really good. And maybe in Monsters, Inc., they were still like, how do you make a human body, though, that people aren't like, ugh, like, that looks wrong.
Right. How do you ride the edge of, like, the uncanny valley without falling in?
Which is funny, because the only human character in Monsters, Inc., besides the little girl, if I'm remembering correctly, well, I guess there's a couple of them, but,
Andy.
like, the kid and the... Is Andy in Monsters, Inc.?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just jumping back to...
That's true. And honestly, Andy doesn't look that, well, he doesn't look great in Toy Story 1, but he does look a lot better in Toy Story 2. Like, they're definitely getting there. And in Monsters, Inc., like, it's funny to me that the dummy kid in the bed, like in the test room, is like kind of the kid you get the best look at, pretty much. Like, there's not really a lot of people like running around and like doing stuff. And then the baby, I mean, obviously, like half the time she's in like a weird little monster costume. So
what's her name?
Boo.
Yeah, Boo, right. I wonder if having the dummy in the bed at the beginning and having it be a dummy, but you don't know it at first, is a comment on how they're not good at people.
But that's what I was wondering. I was like, it's pretty smart. There's no bottom half.
Right.
So all you have to do is worry about this stuff. Ugh,
they seem like a very self-aware studio in that way. In that, like, as you describe certain choices they make, you're like, oh, so brilliant to like do that, like walk before you can run type of stuff. Like, don't do the thing you can't do. Find that middle ground of challenge yourself, but also like be in your comfort zone. I think that's what really appeals about this studio, and probably why you have dreams of working there, because they're riding that line so gracefully in the way like any creative endeavor should. Right.
Yeah. There's working with intent and planning ahead, I think, a lot of the time. That's why they always have a freaking, like, throw forward to whatever next movie they're working on, like, in a current movie. Like, I think they have a Nemo in Monsters, Inc. at the end. It's, like, one of Boo's toys. It's, like, a little Finding Nemo. And Finding Nemo hadn't come out yet, obviously, not for a couple more years. But it's, like, they always already knew the kind of stuff that they were, like, looking ahead to. And I just think that's
true. Yeah,
smart.
They must have had at least concept art or like some stage of script as these movies like went into production. Another one was probably in an early stage.
Yeah.
Obviously. Next movie?
I'm ready.
Well, I'm actually skipping probably what is my favorite stretch, because no, wait, am I?
The Cars era was a really it was a standout time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, anybody listening that loves Cars, I mean, good for you. Again, I'm the age I am. That movie was not for me in 2006 on June 9th when it came out. I saw it, I was fine.
I tried to watch it recently, and I was a lot more put off by it than I was the first time I saw it. I couldn't tell you why either. There's just something about it conceptually that I just was like, I don't know how this happened. I don't know. Kids love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, well, I think that's the problem, right? It's kind of pandering. It's the parts of Toy Story that aren't the juicy bits or something, right? It's a playful, cute object that you want to hold and play with come to life in a way.
And the story does seem very empty to me as somebody who has no interest or passion in like racing stuff or cars or Route 66 or any of that. So I'm not the target audience, clearly, but like this is the only movie on our unlist, I guess. Cars.
Yeah, we don't have to make negative lists. Yeah. But I think that you're phrasing it that way is like, oh, this isn't a movie for me because it's about cars. But with Toy Story, if you hadn't seen Toy Story and I was like, hey, Caitlin, here's a movie about a cowboy doll, you'd be like, well, I'm not super into that, right? It's like how you tell the story or...
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. Like you could have loved a Cars movie.
Yeah, and I do think it's just like a little more niche in its appeal. And obviously it's like wildly popular again, like with kids, which I think is a different thing. But... There's a nostalgia and like a passion in Cars that I don't like have any familiarity with. And I think just like most of the people I've talked to about it also don't. But I could easily see, especially if you love cars or if you love Route 66 and you're passionate about that, you might get a lot out of it, honestly. I just don't know what that's like.
That's true, and we never will.
Maybe someday. I'll keep you posted, ladies and gentlemen and everyone.
Okay, well, we kind of have this thing of, we're kind of going chronologically. I'm skipping, and just stop when you love one of these. I'm skipping Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Cars. Do you want one of those? Okay.
So you're stopping on Ratatouille? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I am. That's my next pick.
So Ratatouille was also the next one for me.
Oh, for you? Okay, cool.
I am a little surprised, I want to say, that you're skipping The Incredibles. For some reason, I thought that one would speak to you particularly.
No, you're right. I do love it, but I actually switched it out for one of the shorts that's coming up later.
Nice.
Because, yeah, I fucking love The Incredibles, but in terms of leading up to what Soul is and what this kind of like Pete Doctor-ness is, him being the main guy, I don't think Incredibles fits that lane, because Brad Bird did that whole movie, which makes it stand out simply because it's the only time, according to the wiki, where one person did all of it.
Just it's a full fucking bar across, and like yeah, exactly. Nobody else's is like that.
Yeah, it's just 2 4-letter words, Brad Bird, across 3 parts of a spreadsheet. Which, I mean, you know, I love when one person is able to kind of facilitate their idea through like a powerhouse of a studio like that, because you just get something a little weirder and more intimate. Like, I'm not really sure, this could be a different episode, what The Incredibles is trying to, I kind of know what it's trying to say, but I don't think it's doing it super clearly.
It feels really weird to watch now, even though you're totally right. At the end of the day, I feel good about The Incredibles, but watching it, I'm like, that's messed up.
Yeah, it is pretty messed up if you were to write down, if you were to logically break down what happens, it's kind of strange where we arrive at.
Yeah, and some of the ideology
and what we celebrate
that is espoused throughout, I'm like, are you sure, Brad?
I think this is a bigger idea that I want. It'll come up over and over again, because I just think about this all the time. When you get so deep into a project where there's so many tentacles of the beast here to manage once you write that story, I think you just start to forget what you were going for in the first place. And that's why sometimes a movie gets weird or gets, I mean, not that this is always excusable, but like if representation is an issue in something, or just the themes that emerge are odd, I feel like maybe half the time it's because people lost track of what they were trying to do. And it just became pieces shifting around to make this story resolve itself. But where it resolves is not where it should have, other than all the questions are answered or something.
You know, so it's really interesting that you're saying this. And I actually think I'm going to pitch this to you after this. But essentially, I think maybe we should have an episode that's just about The Incredibles, because it doesn't feel like a Pixar movie to me. And like, it totally does feel like a Pixar movie to me. But it's also like, it's one of those movies when I'm like, dang, I like really want to watch a Pixar thing. I'll never pick The Incredibles, because it's its own very strong flavor. And I watched The Incredibles, like I've seen it so many times, but it's not the same as wanting to throw on a Toy Story or a Monsters, Inc. or what have you. It's like, it's outside of that. And for all the reasons you're saying. But I also think it's because he was too focused. Like, it's so focused. Like, that movie actually is really tight to me, but it's just so focused on its themes that it was like, you just got to pursue this straight down the line to its logical conclusion, even though that conclusion actually turns out to be like kind of weird and aggressive. But it's just like, you've laid out all of this stuff. It's like, it's a mid-century story. Like, it's about family. It's about like family relations. And it's about a traditional family and parenting. And so mixing all of that together, there's a lot of like conservative ideals that are just locked up in there. And then also the idea of like people like superheroes. I don't know. And then you put all of that onto this one thread, like you're gonna come out the end with some weird stuff in it. And it was just like so laser focused on those things that it had to come out the way it did. It's kind of interesting to think about. And I think it's like the same result as what you're saying, where it doesn't necessarily mean, like, I don't really look at The Incredibles and be like, dang, like, that's really fucked up in the way that some other movies are.
Right, a whole different conversation on the cultural impact of The Incredibles. Has it actually affected anything, or is it just kind of a weird auteur project like this world Brad Bird made up that clearly he wanted to revisit, because he does, and who knows if he'll do another one, but he's very invested in, like you were saying, like following that trajectory. And the time period is very interesting too, because I haven't mentioned this yet, but I draw comics, and the comics in the series I'm doing right now are set in the late 70s, early 80s. And my editor is always like, it can look like the time period, but don't extract the values of the time period, because that's not what people want to see. They don't want to relive or live for the first time what it was like to be like a kid or whatever in like 1975, or in the case of The Incredibles, what does it feel like? It's like the mid 60s or something?
Yeah, like 50s, 60s. And
yeah, like
honestly,
whatever that early 60s period.
I don't want to know really what it was like to be a mom during that time period, if I'm being honest. And that's a big part of that. And it's not tainted by that. It's just, that is true. It's like a weird line to toe.
And also the question arises, and maybe they weren't asking this when they were making the movie. It's like, why set the values of the period? Like, just use the look of the time, but then why can't it feel like, the modern times in terms of like the roles of the people in the household? It's just so strict about its, I mean, in a way, that's what makes it great. And that's what makes it awful, is that it's so strict.
That's totally true. We definitely need to do a full episode about this, because I also like the sequel. I have so many further feelings based on where the sequel went that
yeah, totally. Write that
down.
And
I feel like there was some weird, do we have a Google sheet for that?
No, but we definitely should have already had it going, but we'll probably remember
We'll figure it out.
These
I'll
things,
remember this one, and then we'll just put that together. So I don't want to steal your thunder from bringing up this movie, since you did it first, even though it is also the next one on my list. And God help us if just our list continues to be identical for the entire rest of the time. But
maybe we just need a third host who just hasn't seen any of these movies.
Yeah, somebody who's completely the opposite, to just kind of mix things up, a foil for us, if you will.
Yeah, we're going to have to get in a fight about something. I'm sure we'll find it.
Provoke us, please. Listener, tweet at us with controversial topics.
Okay, so I have a fun starting point for Ratatouille, because, I mean, it's a fucking masterpiece. But on YouTube, I found a video. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube.
That doesn't sound right.
No, it's pretty true. I'll send
you the link. I don't know
if
that bears out. Okay.
So here's the comment from his post. In the fall of 2006, Michel Gagne was contacted by Brad Bird to create a series of animated vignettes for his movie Ratatouille. The concept was to design and animate abstract representations of what the character was tasting. So I picked this one, again, masterpiece, but it's like the first time we get that little abstraction playing a role so clearly on screen. Like, we get little hints of it early on, like maybe the intro to Monsters Incorporated. It's kind of like graphical. But this is like just this magical moment in this movie where they have the confidence to visualize like the kind of synesthesia of these characters. I just think that's
a stroke
great.
Of genius.
Yeah. Because it's also playing off, the look of it is very Fantasia to me.
You're so right. And it's soft in a lot of like sometimes it comes into focus, but it like fading out like that is so pleasurable. It's so weird to be talking about this because it's so abstract already. So hopefully you've seen this. You know exactly what we're talking about.
They know.
But yeah, it's like art. And it's really funny because I notice this every time I watch it. I'm like, there's that iconic Pixar jazz again. It always comes in really strongly during that part. I mean, it's there a lot, but it's just one of those things where it just feels like this is one of the most Pixar moments that could happen. It's all of these, the colors and the flavors and like da-da-da-da-da and the jazz coming in. It's just like you are watching like the Pixar film.
Yeah, the jazziness of it is right. And that's sort of like that's sort of weaving its way into what these movies are, is sort of as the plots, not to jump to Up or anything, but some of these movies start to really experiment with what it is to tell a children's story, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like this jazziness is just starting to enter the realm here because, of course, this is also like a movie about criticism and responding to subjective art and things like this. It's just, there's so many layers to it other than like a rat running around a kitchen.
Yeah. It's very adult, actually, to me. And this one is interesting because I specifically did not see it in theaters. And I remember it was because I just thought the trailer looked dumb. I say that, and I'm not sure that I did, but I remember being like, I don't think that looks good for whatever reason. And I think it was one of those trailers they did at the time that wasn't actually like cuts of the movie. It was some kind of like individual thing that they had just made for an ad, and it just didn't grab me. And this was before my rat phase. I did not own rats or cherish them at this time in my life. So there was no connection, but it is by far my favorite Pixar movie. No contest.
Yeah. It's
absolutely
a grower.
Love it. Yeah. And I swear to God, it's like every time I rewatch it, I'm like, damn, still just as good, if not better than the last time.
Yeah, it contains multitudes.
Well, and it's funny too, because like as I've gotten older, I've like started to get more annoyed by Remy, which I think is the point because he's annoying at the beginning. He's like very snide and like, I know about things. But then you also like relate to that if you're a creative artist and being like, yeah, I was dumb too once. And like, you know, at the end, maybe kind of working, like learning to work with people and like learning to be a little bit more humble about your stuff or whatever. I know a lot of people love this movie, but I wonder if it's just like, if you're a creative person, like there's just so much there for you to relate to. Cause it's not like I'm good at cooking or know anything about cooking, but it's spoken about in such artistic terms. And it's the same way when he's talking about like, man, I'm trying new stuff together. And it's like, it's totally wild. And like, that's what I live for. That it's a feeling that you can relate to very strongly, even if, you know, whatever you're into is like painting or, you know, totally different creative pursuits. And then there's something else I like about this, even though I don't know how much I identify with it per se, but I like a movie that it's like, he's literally just a rat, you know, but he can crush it. And I'm like, that is very appealing to me as somebody who really does not like the concept of auteurs, or I don't know. There's a lot of like the art world that I really dislike, which is still, some of Ratatouille has that, especially at the beginning. He's like very full of himself and like all of that stuff. But just the concept that you can kind of, you have to just not worry about what other people are kind of thinking or saying about you, and you just have to like kind of go for it. That's just like fundamentally appealing.
Yeah, and he raises up the team around him, right? Because I also, you know, have a problem with the genius theory and all that shit, because it's just fucking false. It's like there's a lot of people putting a lot of effort into. It's just false. That's it. So like at least Ratatouille, I don't know if it's trying to say this or it's more just because rats come in groups, whatever the collective noun is for rat. I don't know.
I think it's a mischief.
Oh yeah, that's right. I love that. So the
cute.
mischief. So like, you know, Remy raises up his brothers and sisters and family and everyone around him. He becomes like the face of the restaurant and gets to be on the logo or whatever, but he's also bringing everybody along with him, which, you know, just kind of feels better and more realistic about what it means to excel at something. Like there's people that are with you in that journey.
Yeah, it's also like nice to note that he sort of fails in a way at the end, because, and it's so weird, they just sort of slip that in there, and it's like, it's another nice thing that in any other movie they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't be like, oh yeah, by the way, the restaurant closed and they had to kind of figure it out and like make it somewhere else, but they did. And it like, in any other movie, they'd be like, cut this for time. Like, what are you doing? Like, just have them win. And like 5-star Gusto restaurant, like done. And I love that they did that, because that's also real to me. I'm like, sometimes it just doesn't work out the way that you thought it was going to. And it doesn't mean, it has like no bearing on your ultimate success. And that's interesting to me.
Yeah. There's a level of, like the rules of the world, the stakes are higher and they feel a little more relatable. Cause I had the same impression of this movie as you did when it came out. Like the word Ratatouille, I didn't really know what that meant. So it made me feel stupid. It's long. It's got a lot of letters. The trailer was
French
unclear.
Stuff.
I'm sure they were not confident about how to market this movie because it's just doing so many things. It's not clearly about one thing unless you like rats and kitchens, which is just a pitch for a movie that could only happen at Pixar, right? Like nobody's making that movie other than Pixar. But what else was I saying? Oh yeah, also the logic of Remy, what's the boy's name?
Oh, Linguini.
Yeah,
of
Linguini.
Course, obviously.
The way he has to like marionette him, and imagine like the storyboarding that shit, like figuring out all those details that they could have done that a totally different way, but they didn't because this world had to feel real. And that's another like kind of leveling up of their storytelling. That's just another studio would have done it a different way. They wouldn't have made, them move the restaurant. They wouldn't have used the kid as the marionette. Like all these choices make this movie pretty perfect. That's
something that strikes me a little bit more every time is how freaking wild they were like, the rat can just control him by his hair. And you're like, okay, I'll keep watching. And I'm not even going to think about that anymore. I'm just accepting it as a given. That's insane. Like the gall of Pixar in a way to be like, yeah, it turns out he can just kind of like, and he cooks good. And you're like, are you kidding me right now? And everyone just accepts it, but they're so masterful that you literally don't think about it. Like, yes, people make stupid memes about it on the internet that I laugh at and enjoy, but like, that doesn't make any sense. And no studio would have been like, that's just crazy enough to work. But it literally is just crazy enough to work. And I never questioned it. And that's what's so bizarre is like not until like a few rewatches ago I was like, this is dumb as hell when you think about it. But you don't.
It's a perfect magic trick.
And that's like, it just works. Don't worry. Can other people do this? Can other rats do this to people? Never. It's never going to occur to you because you're so enveloped in how classic and good the story is. That, I don't know. Best movie.
Yeah, it's true.
One of my top faves of all time, probably.
And I also love the little moment when the critic flashes back to his childhood and his like memory of, because we all have that with like things that we care about, whether it's something you're eating or like I have that feeling when I look at certain artists drawing. Like if I look at Edward Gorey's line art, like his hatching, I just flash back to the first time I saw it, and it's just forever enriching to me. So I just love that, taking the time with that character.
And actually using childhood nostalgia for comfort food, like, it almost feels weird to talk about it just because I'm like, well, everybody's seen this. It's not special anymore. But just what a masterstroke. Like, who came up with that idea? Is like, the flavor of this food tastes like his mother taking care of him after he wrecks his bike. That's crazy.
Yeah. And this is a Brad Bird one, which I didn't know because he didn't write it by himself. But
I believe, the first movie in Pixar's dreaded kind of situation where they started kicking directors off of their own projects or like kind of having trouble development. I don't know the story here at all, but it was like Jan Pinkova's story. And he was the guy, if I'm remembering correctly, that wrote Jerry's Game. Like, he was the guy who did Jerry's Game. And then I think he left Pixar after this, maybe, but he like conceived of Ratatouille. And then at some point they were like, he's not going to get it there. And so they removed him from the project and put Brad Bird on it. And Brad Bird finished it out.
Okay. It does feel like, it feels like a movie that's kind of people building on what somebody did before because it's a little convoluted. And like you're saying, when you describe all the weird mechanics of how the plot works, it's just like, wow, how did you arrive at that? And it must only by bringing in collaborators that are solving problems you couldn't solve.
Yeah.
Right? So, Ratatouille, great. Any other thoughts on that one?
I'm trying to think, just because it's such a freaking iconic movie and to not miss anything. But I don't know. Just really good movie. I will say, quick shout out to its aesthetics, because in a way similar to Toy Story, almost like what you were saying about Toy Story earlier, like it just feels so real. And like, I get so hungry when I watch that movie, and not just because cartoon food looks better than human food, like real food, but like I feel like I can smell it. I feel like I can taste it. Everything's so soft and like warm, and like the soup has those little like oil bubbles on the top, and it's just like, dang, like this looks so good. I don't know. True. And it's like, you just did such an amazing job at making this a sensory experience, and it's a cartoon movie about a rat chef.
Also, that on top of the food thing, that kitchen is one of the best like set pieces in any of these movies. I think it like the brass and the layout and the logic of it. It all makes sense. Like you get a real feel for it, and it's small too. But I just love when something small and humble can feel big and familiar. Like by the time you're done with the movie, you've really lived in that kitchen.
Yeah, I feel like I could walk around in it like without thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, soon you'll be able to, because in at Epcot there's, well, I guess they have this in France already. Not to jump to like Disney parks, but this is
which
our
I'm sure will be
fucking
its own
show,
series.
and we'll do what we want.
At
But
some point.
have you seen like the ride through for the Ratatouille ride? Which so you can live the kitchen, the dream.
I would like to do that.
Imagine being in a kitchen.
Honestly, well, I've spent a lot of time in kitchens this past year, specifically my kitchen only, and no one else's kitchen or literally anywhere else at all.
Just really got to know your own kitchen, so.
It sucks a lot.
Well, for everybody listening to this in 2027, we'll just move past. You can look up the pandemic on Wiki. Okay, so Ratatouille, we bow before you. Now, I skipped a bunch in a row.
Really?
So, well, not because I actually love this trilogy of Ratatouille, Wally, and Up because it's fucking off the rails where we arrive at by the time we get to Up, as in terms of like what these movies are doing and what they're fucking about.
Yeah.
As we have like old men as our like protagonists. That hasn't happened since like Cocoon in like 1987 or whenever that movie came out.
You almost get the feeling that Pixar was just like, what can we do next that like no one would understand or see coming?
Yeah, and the way they put these together, I mean, I'm not, if you can stop me, but yeah, I'll just say that Wally and Up feel like weird patchworks of story. And like Wally feels like two halves of kind of different narratives. Up just kind of keeps going. It's not like yes-anding itself in a normal way. It's just kind of living in its own weird world of kind of sadness. But
Up is very bizarre.
Yeah, so I actually didn't pick those because, well, first of all, because we were doing 5 movies and I wanted to pull a short, and then there's one very important movie to me, and then a surprise contestant. So how do you feel? Wait, why don't you go? Grab a
my
movie.
next one was Wally, and after that I wrote Up ? And that's where I stopped. I wasn't confident about Up for kind of the same reason. Like, I have a lot of feelings about Up, but it's weirdly like one of the Pixar movies I've seen maybe the least at this point. Well,
me too.
Of like the classic era Pixar movies. Which is so strange. Like, I love the idea of it, and I love a lot of the concept of it. And I've always liked how sad it was in a way, because it's just nice sometimes to see a movie that's just like, that's kind of a sad story, but there's like a big bird in it too, and the cute dog. Like, I don't know. It's such a weird movie. And I like that.
Those characters all, they show up very sporadically. Like it's kind of Wizard of Oz-ish or something in the way they just sort of run into these colorful characters and start bringing them along the journey. But they don't, I don't know. I don't want to criticize it because I haven't watched it in a long time. It is a combination of a bunch of things I am into, I guess. I like adventure. I guess I like airships. I have a dog. But it just doesn't, it feels like work to watch it in a way that like Ratatouille or The Incredibles doesn't.
It's not that fun. There's always kind of like a sad vibe and like a negative vibe lurking during that. So I do agree. But I do want to stick to Up, and I'm just going to have to, I was struggling with this last one because this is kind of crossing the threshold. And I think for me, I was going to say Brave was the fine line for me on like the eras of Pixar and like the turnover, but I actually think it's earlier. I don't know how you're going to feel about this. Because I think Toy Story 3, I don't, in hindsight, really care for it that much. And some people love Toy Story. I don't dislike it, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I just have like complex feelings about it, I think.
That's fine. You can go into them. I'll just say that I love a good heist on a superficial level, like Ocean's 11. And Toy Story 3 has a great heist right in the middle. So, I mean, that's it. But I understand where you're coming
I'll get
from.
into it just briefly, I think, because if we just have time to talk about, like, I feel like that was a movie that I saw and I was like, this is different than other Pixar movies. And it has a quality to it that all the subsequent Pixar movies, I think, have. And I need to rewatch it so I can maybe sort of try to suss that out. But
wow,
I do want to talk about...
Yeah, write that down. That sounds interesting. Content. Okay, yeah. Like this idea that the shifting of gears, which I kind of almost see what you're saying. So we'll have to dig
there's
into
just
that
a flavor to it. Yeah, maybe I need to watch it first.
But I sort of pushed you past Wally. Did you? Yeah. Was that your pick?
Yes, I'm going to go back and I'm going to commit to Wally. Just because you're totally right when you say that it's like a halvesy movie where it like does kind of like perfectly split into just totally different thing in the second half. But like it's the first half that I love so much. Yeah. And it's funny because you can kind of see this, like a lot of Pixar movies have an era and a flavor that they are hearkening to, and then they really like commit to that and they love it. And like The Incredibles is a great example of that because it's like, hello, this is the mid-century, like welcome. Immerse yourself in this. And then Cars is like nostalgia for this era. Hello. And Wall-E is like old movies.
True.
And even like old cartoons. But I still like cannot handle how just like the first 20 minutes of that movie have basically no dialogue. And it's just a little trash robot like going around doing trash stuff with his cockroach friend. And it's so interesting. Like there's just something about it where I'm like, I almost wish that you just chop off the back half of that movie, which I don't hate, but just chop off the back of that movie and then like make it dark.
Whoa, yeah.
because it doesn't really, but in the first movie you could see it being pretty dark. I'm like, where are all not that I necessarily want this or expect this from Pixar, but it's just kind of a thought exercise. I'm like, where are all the like ruined bodies? Like, how many people made it onto this space cruiser and where were they from? What languages are still spoken? Like, what's been retained of human culture? Not a lot, because at the end they're like, yeah, we're super fat and I don't know what a book is. Like, they've totally regressed and like nobody knows what an ocean is or whatever, like that kind of stuff. But it gets to be a little bit of superficial, like, aren't people garbage? But like, let's start over and like start fresh and like maybe we can do it right this time. I don't know. It ends up feeling a little pithy to me by the end.
Yeah, they start to get they start to want to explore other settings and I guess like types of physics and animation. Like obviously that whole second half of the movie is all squash and stretch type of, it's just doing all these fun animation things. But then like, yeah, what is it actually saying is just a bit insulting or
a little, or just reductive almost. Cause I'm like, yeah, capitalism is ruining the planet. Like, yeah, I totally agree. Like cosine, whatever, trash everywhere is really bad. All the animals are dead. No plants. Yeah, it sucks. That's not good. But just to be like, and all humans went into space and I guess they're all like American and really fat. Like no one on that ship was like, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm like, really? Like, do you really think so little of humanity? As somebody who like feels fairly misanthropic a lot of the time, that's just not reality to me. I don't know. Maybe you did just fill up a cruiser with the dregs of humanity. That makes sense. Like maybe only the garbage rich people could afford it. I don't know. There's a lot that you can kind of extrapolate here.
Right.
But it's just, I wanted to see more. Like, that's like Wall-E is the contrast where it's like, look at this human soul. But he's like a little robot. He's not even a human. Like, and I'm like, okay, yeah. But you're kind of like really giving the shaft to all of the human people. And I guess it was supposed to be that Wall-E sort of like revives that in humanity. It's not like it just doesn't quite land, I think.
Yeah.
And
well, the problem,
there's some disconnect.
Yeah, I think so. In the way the first half of it is, not the first half, but if, let's say you took Wall-E and made it like a Mad Max, Fury Road type of movie where it's just all one adventure. It's like all one line from point A to B where you're just watching him kind of work his way through a system and like solve problems and, meet a couple friends along the way, I don't think you would have these issues. Because once they juxtapose that with like, what are humans doing on this spaceship, then it becomes about something totally different. And it reframes what you saw earlier in a way and starts to pose these questions that are just, it's too many things for a movie in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I think I love the idea of this robot is more human than the humans that are left, and without him, they wouldn't, like, it's because of his influence that they kind of reconnect to their humanity. But there's something so bizarre about, first of all, the Earth just heals itself. There's a planet again. It's livable, whatever. And then Wally has to go to space to be like, hey, everybody, there's a plant. Like, it would have been a lot more interesting, honestly, if they were like in a bunker underground on Earth and they had to do something. Because like at the end of the movie, it's like all positive and upbeat, and there's a whole credit sequence about like with like mosaic sort of like ancient human kind of style to it, where they're like doing crops, like growing crops and like irrigating, and like, so you're like, oh, okay, they rebuilt humanity. I'm like, did you see the planet before at the beginning of this movie? It was covered in trash. That's still there. You can't just ignore that. And it's still happening. What did they do with all the garbage? And that's why it feels like just a little bit off. And I needed, I think, instead of the Wally, like Eve, like two robots that love each other thing, which is very tender in its way, maybe they should have had like a human companion for Wally. Like, I need some human agency. Somebody to be like, you know what? We have really lost touch with the situation and we need to do something to fix it. Instead of Wally just being like, hey, come back to Earth, and it's like 100% fine now somehow, even though it was just, skyscrapers of garbage 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, you're right. It did need like a human point of view so we can like empathize with the human, because all the humans suck and they're all
the humans are bad.
Yeah, so it just feels it feels insulting. Because are you talking to us, Pixar? Like, who are you? Like, because at this point, we're all on board with Pixar. Like, wherever they're taking us, like everybody's watching all these movies. Whatever the next one is, it's not a sequel. It's not even the same universe as the previous one. We're just going to sit there and watch it. So by the time you get to Wall-E, you're kind of watching it differently than you would other movies, I feel like. Because in the way, like, we're responding to it like this, it's like, it means something when Pixar has something to say. And then you're like, well, what are you saying to us with this one?
Yeah. And like, I think they get together, two of the captain and some woman, like, sort of have a romantic kind of B plot in that. And it, like, I feel nothing about it. Cause I'm like, why should I care that these two people, like, they don't have a connection. They were basically, they bumped into each other by virtue of Wally dicking around on this spaceship. Like, I don't know, it means nothing. And so the human characters aren't really human anymore. There's no humanity to them. And maybe that's the point, but then I also don't care what happens to them, really. Like, they're alien to me.
They feel alien, but then because it's like an ecological story in a way, it feels like it's about actually our planet, whereas something like Toy Story doesn't feel like our universe. Like, we're not looking at that world, but there's something about Wall-E that feels judgmental of our actual existence.
I think that's true. It's why I think a lot of people didn't like this, but I kind of support the fact that they used actual footage of real people sometimes in it. I was like, that was a weird decision for you to do, and I'm fine with it. Like, I actually think it kind of works. And maybe they should have just had real people in it at the end, and they should have all just been real people. Like, wow,
that would have been a bold move.
Like an anti-Space Jam, or like I don't know if Space Jam was where I went when we have like Roger Rabbit. But like I honestly, Pixar, contact me.
Get some
I
people.
have a great idea for Wall-E 2.
Yeah, live action.
We can finally make Wall-E the sequel. But yeah, it's actually funny because I didn't realize I'd spend this much time sort of criticizing Wall-E instead of talking about what I liked about it, because I do think that the first half is worth the price of admission, kind of. And like, I guess what I want is for, like I was saying, like, cut off that back half, and like, what if humans never show up? And what if it's literally just about, what if like the Eve robot was just kind of like running on automation and there are no people left? and then they find each other and then they like have a relationship and like that's the end. Like that would be really fucked up, but it also would have been great.
Yeah.
Wally too. Call me.
Yeah, Wally, like one half, like half of Wally plus
Wally, what really happened? Like not that, yeah. We'll just have like the first movie was a dream all along and the second movie just plays out as described.
But yeah, that first 20 minutes is perfect. And I've seen that a million times. And it is interesting because on Wally's TV, he's watching, what movie is he watching? It's
I
not
cannot
like
remember.
White Christmas or something. I don't know.
I've never seen it, but it has that like dun, 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 song. And there's like the hats. I don't remember though. I don't remember the movie.
Yeah, it's just a sweet little moment that you hadn't really seen them do something like that. And it seemed to tell us, maybe that's the point where I'm saying this feels like it's supposed to be our world because they're actually watching a movie from our world.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else is kind of a parallel dimension. Like there's no Woody cowboy toy. There's like Howdy Doody, you know?
Right.
Whereas like in Wally, they're watching a movie we know. Well, not you and I, but.
We do not know it. We are very uncultured. I remember when Wally came out though, like people grousing about it being preachy and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's for that reason. They're being sensitive because it's like environmental and people don't like that. Or, you know, people were getting kind of salty about it at the time. But yeah, if it was like Space Mars covered in trash, I don't think people would have cared as much.
Yeah, it is the beginning of people recognizing a movie for a very specific scene. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say that. But it does have that iconic beginning in like the wordless thing that you see pop up every once in a while. Like, oh my God, that scene in that movie, it's like an unbroken take or like there's no dialogue. Like all these kind of like cinematic gimmicks that have been around forever, but like people start to notice them. I just like Wally kind of playing off that because it is very old fashioned in the beginning, the way those like old silent films were.
Yeah. And what I loved because it was like about our like horrific future. So there was multiple stuff going on there, like a voiceless character who was nostalgic for old movie, like really old movies in like a destroyed dystopian, like a shell of civilization. Like all of that aesthetically is just good. And it just worked. So where the rest of the movie went, but that was just like a lot of interesting ideas all wrapped up together. And then of course, because they're like animation nerds making this movie for people like us to absorb, they did it great. Like, and they nailed the reference and then it just feels good. And the little cockroach guy was just a little cherry on top, in my opinion. Very cute. Great design on him. Very streamlined.
Yeah, he's the perfect pairing. Yeah, he just fits perfectly with Wally and his like bulky cubeness. Yeah, I guess I would have picked this one because really it's them just showing off that they can fucking make anything a character at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of peak that. It's peak characterization.
They really were in their prime at this time, I think. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I do, like, except for Cars. R.I.P.
Right, yeah. This 2007, this little stretch, because then, we get back to Toy Story after Up, and now we're just, like, back in familiar territory, and we're having a good time, but, then it does start to get familiar for a lot of it. I gotta shout out Brave just because, the only one directed by a woman, Brenda Chapman, is in there. So I feel like you just gotta give it some attention because it's not like the same fucking 7 dudes over and over again. And it's just it's a little,
No.
I hadn't seen this one in forever and we just watched it recently. And it's old fashioned in a different way, in a very like Disney way, right? It's just such a simple fable.
Yeah. I have really mixed feelings about
it.
Brave.
Doesn't pay off in the way I want. Like it's very low key. It doesn't have a lot of settings. It's all very green and brown and gray throughout, aside from the character's hair, which is amazing.
Which is great. And they should have bragged about it. Like they were right to do that. But so the first mixed feeling I have about it, obviously, is that like Brenda Chapman didn't get to make the movie she wanted to make. And I think Brave would have been phenomenal if they just let her do that. Genuinely. Because I think Mark Andrews got on it and like kind of boned it up a little bit. No offense to Mark Andrews, who I don't know. And so maybe it's not fair to say that. I don't know. Maybe delete that. I don't know. But maybe. I don't want to be rude to him. I don't know him from Adam. But like I have talked to you about this before. I don't know if you remember because it was an offhand comment, but it was just like something I sometimes do for fun as a weird hobby is just watch all the commentaries for these movies over and over and over again to just glean every ounce of like, how'd you make this? Delicious. Like, teach me how to do the films good. And Brave was the first one where I was like, I don't agree. Like, I'm like watching it and listening to what they're saying, and I'm like, that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. And because it was the first one I'd watched where, and I think it was Mark Andrews like doing the commentary. Of course, like Brandon Chapman was nowhere to be seen. And he was talking about like, you have to choose X, Y, or Z, or you have to cut this or add this, all like always in service of the story, always in the service, like a service of the story. And I was like, first of all, this movie, like Brave, has so many little seeds and bits of like a genuinely arresting and fascinating movie, but there are too many. And then you have these weird periods of comic relief that like do not work at all. So, cause there's like a time when the mom is like maybe gonna die or something, and they're like running all over the castle, and like the twins are like doing little goofy twin things and like jumping into the boobs of like this poor woman. And like, and it's so jarring. I'm like, am I supposed to like care that you're, trying to kill the mom who's like a bear now? Or am I supposed to like be having a fun, rollicking, good family time? Like, you have to let me feel emotions. Like, you can't, I don't know. And hearing them say like, you have to do this in service of the story, I was like, did you though? Which wow, I'm about to sound like a real dick right now, and I'm sorry. But it felt to me, I'm like, yes, because I've heard that a million times on all the other commentaries I've watched, or any of the books that I've read about like Disney film production or any of this stuff. But I never felt like it didn't actually work until now. And so now I'm wondering, like, do you really know what that means? Like, do you know what you're doing in this instance? Because this movie feels a little schizophrenic, and it feels a little like you did have a few different movies that you kind of chunked together into one thing. And it's the first movie I feel like it happened to, because again, like Ratatouille had a different director, and then they took him off and they put a different director on, but it doesn't feel like it. In fact, it feels like one of the best movies that's been done, and it came out so good. So like, why did Brave come out? Like, half the time I think about Brave and I'm like, damn, did you remember that there's a giant monster at the end? Because I forget about him sometimes, because like, is he the bad guy? Not really. And like thematically, he doesn't really, because like the bad guy is kind of like the mom and the daughter's relationship.
Yeah, there's not really supposed to be an antagonist other than their lack of communication, right? Because they bring that bear. That bear is just a representation of the curse she's under, right? Because they kind of drop its name. Right. Yeah, he's like a warrior from a different age or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just feels like there wasn't enough going on there, because at the end they just kill him, I'm pretty sure. And then like sort of like, oh, I release his spirit, and like the mom is like a human again. But it doesn't feel like it comes together. Yeah,
it's very unsatisfying in that way. Like I wish I had seen it more so I had more thoughts on it, but it just, on that impression, like kind of first impression in a way, as I hadn't really remembered it that well, it just felt like an adaptation of a lesser fairy tale in a way, because it's just, it plays out so humbly. Like, we get a monster. The monster is just kind of a scarier version of what the mom is. There's not a lot of variety. And I also watched How to Train Your Dragon right after this, which those are Vikings, and these are like Celtic, a clan or whatever. But the characters in like How to Train Your Dragon, those characters, those big burly men, are so much more likable than the men in Brave. Like the father in How to Train Your Dragon, awesome. The Brave dad, I don't love him. Like he's not very dad-like. I don't know.
He's barely in it too, really, when you think about it. And he's only for comic relief. But the thing is too, like How to Train Your Dragon is tonally consistent. Because I was going to say like it's mainly a comedy movie, and it's not like it has no emotional situation, but it does not aim for the same heights that Brave is aiming for in terms of like, feel something, like feel this relationship, like duh. And maybe it's harder for me too. Well, because I want women stuff from Pixar, please, thank you. And I was excited about having that, and like a mother-daughter relationship movie has the potential to be very impactful and interesting to me. And then I felt like I didn't really get there. And like, I just didn't ever feel like it was enough about their issues. Like it was superficially like they're fighting, they're not getting along, and then they fix it. But it didn't feel enough. Like really like show me a nasty fight. They have this fight in the movie where the mom like throws the daughter's like bow into the fire, which does kind of hurt. Like when I see that happening, I'm like, oh, that actually like is upsetting to see happen. But I honestly wanted more. I'm like, really delete that bear out of it.
It's too generic of a.
Or yeah, there wasn't enough of him. And I was like, pick one of these things, either like make all of their relationship issues about encapsulated in this other bear, but instead he's just sort of in the background for a lot of the movie. Like there's also like a scene at the beginning where the bear attacks the family, and I think that's just to tell you that there's a big scary bear out there, but the result is that like this bear exists and already like doesn't have any kind of connection to them. It just feels very disjointed, instead of like something about them having a bad relationship caused him to be drawn to them in some way, something like that. Instead it's just like, there's this ghost bear out in the woods, and it did attack us once when I was 2. Anyway, like, let's get back to fighting. And now you're a bear too. Like, right. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to bash it too much because.
But I like Brave, honestly. Like, there's very few Pixar movies that I just like out and out. I'm like, no, not this one. And I like Brave. And honestly, my dad really loves Brave. And like watching Brave with my dad is very fun. He just thinks it's so funny and he loves it so much. And like loves all the music and everything. And like, that's very pleasurable for me. And I don't know. It's nice that he's getting a lot out of it. Like, I don't know. I get excited when my dad is really into like movies with a strong young female protagonist or whatever.
Yeah,
like, I just
think it's very cute
so
that you and your dad love a lot of the same stuff. Because that's just a very charming thing.
Yeah, I owe a lot of my nerdiness to my dad in the best way.
We'll have to have him on sometime.
Oh, he would love that. But you got to watch out because he'll do voices.
Oh.
That can be good, but you just got to tread carefully.
Yeah, we'll have to really structure that episode, the voices episode.
Might get excited.
Okay, we're going to, just shout out to the hair and Brave one last time. Amazing. And
so
then,
good. So good.
Okay, so I'm jumping back 1 year to 2011. You get the short Day and Night. Do you remember that one?
Yes. I thought you were going to say Cars too. I was like, where are you going with this? Yes, Day and Night was the 2D animated
Yeah, it's the kind of Hanna-Barbera.
Right? Like it had like 2D animated characters.
Yeah.
I will say I have not seen it in a long time, so I don't really remember the actual content, but I can picture the characters vividly in my mind.
Well, I just thought it's just clever in the way that it's about animation, because it's got that nose lip style that you see in the Flintstones and old Hanna-Barbera stuff, which is just a fun shout out to something if you like that style of animation. So I guess I just like that they're like, we'll introduce this new era of people to an old style of animation and watch us entertain people with something that's old-fashioned in the way. I mean, Wally's kind of doing that too. It's like, we're so good, we're going to take this really dated idea of like a silent movie and just make you love it again. So there was something with Day and Night that that kind of connected with me there in that way. And I guess I just liked the idea of the 2D with the 3D world behind it. So they're both characters are these little windows, and they're at odds with each other, but then they come to join together. It's just very clever. It's like definitive clever animation. I don't know. I just wanted to point that one out because it's just a little experiment that I feel, I don't know. I just needed to take a break.
I like it. No, I love that.
So,
it's a nice little meditation.
Yeah, exactly. Day and Night's a nice little meditation on what it means to make animation. And all the little choices they make in the characters are a lot of it is callbacks to old moments from Pixar stuff. Like you see the rainbow, that's the rainbow on the door of the daycare center in Toy Story 3. So it's just all these little like callbacks to their legacy.
God, this is cool. I'm like sitting here watching it on YouTube while you're talking about it, just because I was like, I remember that they're like windows, and that's about it.
That
it's
is
like
it.
Much funnier and cleverer than just that on paper?
Right. So I picked that one because the next movie I picked, I don't think you're picking Monsters University, so I'm going to jump right to Inside Out.
No, but I will just say, and this is literally just a quick shout out, we're not going to dwell on it, but Monsters University came out like the year I graduated college.
Oh, congratulations.
So I just want to shout it out. I did it. I just want to shout it out because I was like, I remember sitting there just being so sad. I was like, it's my last year of college. Like, I don't know, college memories. So I always like it more like on top of just regular liking it because it came out like at exactly that time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can't beat a movie that's about the thing you're currently doing in life. Like those coming of age moments in the coming of age movie that just fits perfectly.
And they're talking about like, will I be able to do what I want? Like, da-da-da-da. And I was like, I don't know. Will I?
Oh, sorry to diminish Monsters University. I've actually only seen this one time. So if you have any thoughts on it.
Well, I will say, like, Neil, my husband, really likes Monsters University, and I like it, but I don't love it. And that's why I don't have much to say about it, because, like, I'll still rewatch it, but it's in a very casual sort of way. I'm not kind of mining it for, like, emotional richness on its own merit. And it doesn't have nothing to say, but it just has this, like, what we'll talk about at some point, but maybe not now in depth, but that, like, slickness that the Pixar movies in kind of the like 20 teens started to have.
Oh, okay. Slickness. And they just,
I tie that to kind of like the Disney sort of like merger situation, even though I know that happened before. But there's something about it where it just feels, and then I was like, is this because I'm getting older? Which maybe is an interesting thing to talk about here. I was like, well, now I'm like in my 20s. Would I have connected with Monsters University the way that I connect with the past Pixar movies if I was like 15 or 12 or whatever when I saw it? But I don't think so. I mean, I think I would have enjoyed them, but I don't think I would have like, because it just feels like a little bit more of like a universalized experience without having, I don't know, like nothing in Monsters University made me go home and be like, I'm like moved or like I've learned something about myself. I think the messaging was interesting.
Yeah.
And
it's
I liked that it was like, even if you aren't good at this one thing, it doesn't mean that you can't succeed in that field. Maybe you just, like, I don't know. I like that about it. I know some people didn't like that. Because I think, like, you'll work your way up from the mailroom is kind of like a hokey, like, kind of baloney sort of thing to say. But I also, like, well, as somebody who's, like, an animator who is not animating the way that I always wanted to, but I'm still, like, pretty happy with it, I appreciate the fact, like, I appreciate the encouragement that if you're passionate about something, you should just always keep trying to get involved with it. Like, you should just always try that. And there's no harm in it. And you might end up succeeding after all. I don't know. Like, it's a good message. I just don't, it does not emotionally resonate in the same way. So that's all for now. Join us next week as we continue to talk Pixar in the thrilling part 2 of this conversation.
Check out cartoonfeelings.com for an archive of all of our episodes, which is not many at this point. And of course, there's other stuff. You can tweet at us or take a look at our Instagram. Both are at Feeling Cartoons.
Also, share your thoughts and questions by emailing us at cartoonfeelingspodcast@gmail.com. We would love to know your cartoon feelings, so do not hesitate.
Yeah, and don't forget to say something nice.
Please. Ideally, they would be good feelings.
That's all for now, folks. We'll see you next time.